All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're very pleased today that we will be joined by the Humanitarian Coordinator in Ukraine, Osnat Lubrani. She will be joining us virtually from Zaporizhia to brief us on the humanitarian situation there. Just before I put her on, I do have a statement from the Secretary General on Ukraine. It's in the first person, but I'll read it in the third person for your benefit. The Secretary General is pleased that more than 100 civilians have successfully been evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol, in an operation successfully coordinated by the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross. The Secretary General hopes the continued coordination with Kyiv and Moscow will lead to more humanitarian pauses that will allow civilians safe passage away from the fighting and aid to reach people where the needs are greatest. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Osnat Lubrani. I believe she's connected right now. Osnat, are you there? Hi. Yeah, now we can see you. Hold on. We need to be able to hear you in the room. Just 1 second. Do you have her audio? Is it right? Okay. Osnat, please, thanks. It's great to see you. Please start again. We didn't hear you.
Thanks. So just saying, maybe to provide some more information following on the Secretary General's statement. So very pleased and very relieved that we arrived today with a total of 127 civilians to Zaporizhia. Let me also clarify that we, on Azovstal, that we evacuated a total of 101 people, civilians, women, children, elderly, but also men of conscription age, that we brought safely back to Zaporizhia. And then we picked up another 58 civilians from the Mariupol area that joined us in Mangush. Out of those, I would add that there were 20 children. In Azovstal, there were 17, the youngest one 6 months old. We're talking about civilians that have been caught in the steel plant for a total of 2 months. It was just, what can I say? It was moving and horrifying to sort of witness people that have been locked in darkness, living under incessant shelling, coming and seeing this sky for the first time in 2 months, and living, not having a proper bath, not having access to food and water. So it was a very complicated operation. I'm so relieved that they're now here, and I want to thank the UN agencies that have really, I would say, been very well prepared to provide any support that is required. These are agencies that have been very active in responding to the needs that are not just on this operation, but WFP with all of the logistic support and prepositioning, but also UNHCR actually has been very active in providing support to the centers that are registering these refugees. UNICEF and UNFPA, I want to say that the biggest issue, I think, for these people is the trauma, is just dealing with this. They will need a lot of support. And of course, the health issues. We did not have a lot of severe cases, but all of these people are suffering from health issues, and WHO and MSF are also doing very, very good work. Let me just conclude by saying that as I am pleased that this operation was successful, I want to believe that this operation is a stepping stone to more such operations that need to take place, and particularly because there is knowledge that there are civilians still trapped in the Azovstal plant, I think, some of them may have been afraid to come out. Some of them probably couldn't make it. It's a huge area, and if you look, seeing some of these elderly people that could hardly walk, I think some of them simply couldn't make it. So I do want to encourage additional engagement and continued engagement between the parties with support and of the United Nations and the ICRC to continue looking for, planning to do more operations like this to save lives. And but overall, I also again want to reiterate that this follow-up to the Secretary General's engagement in his visits in Moscow and in Kiev with the parties, I think this shows us that it can be done, and I want to say it must be done more in Azovstal for anyone that still needs to be evacuated, and also in other places that are deeply affected in a country that is suffering a terrible war. I'll stop here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your briefing, and thank you and your colleagues for all the work you've done. I'll now open the floor to questions. Edie.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lubrani. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, we thank you very much for doing this briefing and for your work. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. I have a couple of follow-up questions. In your statement, you said that some evacuees decided not to proceed toward Zaporizhia with the convoy. Can you give us a number, and can you tell us why and whether they wanted to go to Russia or they just wanted to stay outside? And secondly, we had been under the impression that there were about 1,000 civilians trapped in Azovstal. Do you have any indication of how many are still there, since you got out just over 100? I know you just mentioned that there are probably more, but is there any indication of how many more are there? And do you have any information on whether the UN and the ICRC will be allowed back to go do another convoy just like the one you just did? Thank you.
So let me say that I'm sorry, because I am a bit tired. So in terms of the the questions, maybe I forgot the first one, and please remind me, and I'll repeat again. But on the numbers that there were some 30-something that did not that chose not to leave, and we spoke to these people. They definitely did that of their own will. You need to understand that the people that came out, they were horrified, realizing that Mariupol is totally devastated, but many of them had been separated from loved ones, and they were worried about first finding who is still alive, where they are. So they wanted first to go back to Mariupol, and I think that was a lot. That was the most that I heard of as the reason that they were worried about just getting out. These are people that have lived their lives. They've worked in Mariupol there, and so it was difficult for them to just leave and without knowing what the fate of their loved ones is. I'm not aware, and I can say that we were with all of those that were evacuated throughout until they were brought, day and night. We accompanied them through all of the screening procedures, and I can tell you that there was. I do not sense that there was any attempt to try to get them to go to Russia. It has not. It did not come up as far as I'm concerned. And as your third question, please remind me again.
About the numbers of civilians still in the Azovstal.
Okay. Look, on the numbers of civilians, I have to tell you that I don't know. The numbers are varying. This is just so that you understand, the steel plant is huge. I mean, just imagining what it took for some of those that we brought out to just get out was a feat, because many of, particularly the elderly, couldn't walk. I mean, they used some sort of broken bus with flat tires to get them from where they were, because, the people that we brought up were not in a condition to walk, more than 5 steps. So very complicated, very difficult. They're located in different parts, and so it's difficult to know. I do know that there's also but for me the total number doesn't really matter. I think that if there are more civilians that are there needs to be a commitment to try and get them out. There is also the issue of the fear. People were very afraid of what's going to happen to them when they got out. They did get the information that the UN and the ICRC are there to assist them to get to Zaporizhia. And I think that in that sense, the operation that we had today is very important, because they will hear about the fact that the people that went out and wanted to go to Zaporizhia arrived today safely to Zaporizhia. So if we do another operation, I think hopefully more will come out. Definitely, I can say for the UN and my colleagues with whom I spent the past few days from ICRC, definitely we are agreed that engagement between the parties on an additional evacuation is something that we are ready to do. And let me also say that I think there is possibility to engage with both parties on this. And in that sense, I think what happened today shows that it can be done in this case. And I want to say it must be done in Azovstal, if there are more to evacuate more civilians, but also in other areas of Ukraine where people are under shelling and are in desperate situation. And we can organize such safe passage arrangements, but also very important to be able to bring back in humanitarian aid to those that are suffering in those places.
But just one of my other...
Sorry, there's so many questions and so little time. We'll have to move a bit. Michelle.
Thank you. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Thank you so much for this briefing. Just to follow up, was there a time frame put on this operation? Was it meant to finish today? Was it only going to be a 5-day operation? And are you seeing an opening with the Russians to do this again elsewhere in your interactions? Are you seeing that they might be willing to do this again somewhere else? And you mentioned that the need is elsewhere in the country as well. What location springs to mind as the next spot?
Let me say that there are no specific plans right now. I think that what I can say is that we are ready to do that, and that further engage. I think that there is what this operation showed, that it is possible, and we're definitely ready to start working on it as soon as possible. In terms of specific locations, I know that there are people. It's just a matter of being separated. This war has separated families and people, and some arrangements need to be made. And I want to say, for people to leave deeply affected areas. But I also want to say that, coming back here to Zaporizhia, I also saw people that want to go to the other side to bring help, to see loved ones, to take loved ones back. So I do think that there needs to be a much more effort to find ways to work on safe passages, and I think it's in places like whether it's in Severodonetsk or in Kramatorsk or in places like Volnovakha that we also passed by. It did take a long time because of this is a country at war, and so we needed to avoid certain places and that were insecure, but also right now in Ukraine, the damage of the infrastructure means that instead of, you all of a sudden need to do a detour because the bridge has been blown or so that was one of the reasons why it took more time. We were there for 2 days. People were informed that they can come out, but this is a very complex and a risky operation, so we couldn't prolong it. We couldn't just stay there, but we are ready to come back in.
Okay, James, and then after that, Maggie. James.
James Bays, Al Jazeera. You talked about people who have to cross the front line or want to cross the front line, people who would take Ukrainians who've gone to Russia, gone to separatist areas. Do you have contact with those people? Do you know that they're what their status is, and how many people do want to come back across the front line? And if I may add to that, everything you're talking about future operations, the Secretary General said when he was speaking both in Kyiv and in Moscow that he wanted to create a humanitarian contact group. How have the discussions on that gone? Is something more permanent to deal with this? Is that looking likely?
So on your first question, I want to say that we do not know. I'm aware that UNHCR is seeking and OHCHR as well to try to find more information about the worries that people are encouraged to cross into Russia, but we cannot confirm that yet. I do want to say that just going through Mariupol and seeing the devastation. I mean, people wanted to flee to wherever it is safe. So there are many reasons that people may want to leave. But I cannot say we are not in a position to say to be able to verify that people are actually coerced. Certainly, from the group that we brought out of Azovstal, there was no issue about that they will cross to Russia. If anything, it was just whether they will go to Zaporizhia or whether they will go back to wherever they want to go elsewhere. So that didn't come up. And as for the Secretary General's discussions on the contact group, I think it is a very good idea. I want to say that from this operation, I do take my takeaways that the engagement between the parties and the facilitation that the UN as well as the ICRC can offer can be helpful, can be a bridge to find a way to regularize to some sort of safe passages and pauses that can save lives and bring much needed assistance to people, and I think that's our role, and that's what I hope that we can do moving forward.
Okay, Maggie.
Hi, Ms. Lubrani. It's Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. Just to follow up, there were some reports on social media, perhaps you can clarify, confirm, or dispel them, that there were a total of 14 buses that left from Mariupol, but that only 3 of them reached to Zaporizhia, and that the fate of 11 of them were unknown. And some of these, social media sort of rumors, I suppose, were saying that people were sent to filtration camps. So can you clarify or dispel some of these rumors? And were you able to bring any humanitarian aid in to leave for the people who are still trapped there?
So let me first say on this was not about bringing humanitarian aid. This was very much focused on bringing the people out. Sorry, I'm really tired. So if you can remind me again.
The 14 buses.
The 14 buses. Okay. And I have answers for all of this. I'm not hedging here. I think that, frankly, is a rumor. There were all the buses that were provided from the Ukraine side came back. We had trouble with a couple that had some, mechanical problems, but I don't think, I know that we came back with all of the buses that were there, and the other point that you asked was, can you remind?
No, that was it, basically. Well, about filtration. I mean, the rumors were saying that these people who disappeared may have gone to filtration camps.
So look, on the procedure. Look, this is a country at war, and there was a screening procedure that was undertaken before we could cross for each of the ones that we took with us. It was intensive, but what I can say is that the UN and the ICRC were constantly present, and it was an example of presence by protection, and we were with them throughout to ensure that there was no it went with. As long as it lasted, it went and allowed them to proceed.
And that was screening by Russians, correct? Or by Ukrainians? Who did the screening?
This was done by the Russians, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I know you're tired, so I'll call on one final question, and then we'll let you go for the night. Joe Klein.
Thank you. Joseph Klein of Canada Free Press. During the evacuation process, was there still fighting or bombardments going on in and around Mariupol? And once the evacuation itself was completed and the buses departed, do you know whether there were bombardments or fighting? Even if there was a pause during the evacuation, did it resume? Thank you.
Look, part of the reason that the mission took as long as it did, because yes, there was occasionally worry about bombardment or incidents or that prevented us from crossing a particular way, and we had to go another way. So yes, we did hear that. There were also, just getting the people out of the mines required some, there was active volatility, not very far. And there was also a need for checking and demining and clearance of unexploded ordinances. So So yes, that did occur.
And again, I'd like to thank Osnat Lubrani, the humanitarian coordinator. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to have tired you out, but please thank you and also all your colleagues for all the great work
Thank
you've
you.
done. I hope you have a good rest.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye. I'll quickly go through a few notes before we turn to Paulina Kubiak, the spokesperson for the President of the General Assembly. We have an update on the Secretary General's travels in West Africa. He's now in Nigeria, where he's currently doing a field visit in the country's northeast. This morning in Niger, he traveled to Walam, a town located in the so-called tri-border area that is hosting men, women, and children displaced by insecurity, as well as refugees from neighboring countries. Speaking to the press, the Secretary General stressed that the international community must support Niger, which is a democratic country that has a clear vision of its future. But Niger's army, he noted, is not sufficiently equipped against terrorist groups. The Secretary General emphasized that Niger's army needs investment and that the country needs to be the wall that terrorists are unable to cross, given the recent coups in the region. Yesterday, in a stakeout with President Mohamed Bazoum, Mr. Guterres called for an urgent and coordinated international mobilization to address not only the security situation, but also the root causes of the Sahel crisis: poverty, exclusion, impunity, food insecurity, climate change, that are aggravating intercommunal tensions and fueling violent extremism. Later in the day, former President Mahamadou Issoufou agreed to chair a joint strategic assessment of security and development challenges in the Sahel region. This assessment, undertaken on behalf of the UN, the African Union, the Economic Community of West African States, and the G5 Sahel, will present proposals on how to strengthen the overall international response to the crisis in the Sahel. From South Sudan, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the recent surge in fighting between armed groups in Lair County in Unity State has led to dozens of people being killed or injured, multiple women and girls being raped and abducted, and has left homes burned and looted. The clashes occurred as aid workers were preparing for the upcoming rainy season and potential flooding. Some 40,000 people have been forcibly displaced from their homes, and they need food, shelter, medicines, and water, among other assistance. Aid agencies are providing healthcare and nutrition treatment through mobile clinics, as well as protection services, including from gender-based violence. They're also providing legal advice and counseling to the displaced people. Some 6.8 million people in South Sudan need assistance and protection this year, but the $1.7 billion humanitarian response plan is just 8% funded. Turning to Haiti, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that clashes have resumed today between gangs in the capital, Port-au-Prince, forcing hundreds of people to flee their homes. Clashes took place in the neighborhoods of the commune of Croix de Bouquet, Cité Soleil, Bas Delma, and Matissan. According to our humanitarian colleagues, violence in the commune of Croix de Bouquet has displaced more than 1,200 people. At least 26 civilians have been killed and 22 injured, although these figures are probably higher. Dozens of houses have been burned. Schools, medical centers, and markets had to close, and a hospital in Marine was looted. Displaced people need access to clean water, food, sanitation kits, children's kits, kitchen kits, mattresses, blankets, and clothing. The UN is ready to provide hot meals and additional assistance in coordination with national authorities. The Food and Agriculture Organization today released its World Forest Report, which detailed ways in which forests can help us recover from the impact of the pandemic, the climate crisis, and biodiversity loss, as well as conflicts. However, it stressed that for this, we need to step up action and investments to halt deforestation, restore degraded land, and sustainably manage forests. Acting on these three areas would reduce carbon dioxide emissions, increase agricultural productivity, and help us meet future demand for natural resources. The report notes that financing for the forest pathways needs to increase threefold by 2030 and fourfold by 2050 for the world to meet its environmental targets. More on the FAO website. I want to flag that media accreditation for the Oceans Conference opens today. The conference will take place in Lisbon, Portugal from the 27th of June to the 1st of July, and the deadline is 12th June. And please be in touch with our media accreditation colleagues for that. Today is World Press Freedom Day. This year's theme is Journalism Under Digital Siege, and it spotlights the multiple ways in which journalism is endangered by surveillance and digitally mediated attacks on journalists, and the consequences of all of this on public trust in digital communications. In his message, the Secretary General pointed to the risks that digital technology poses as many journalists are being censored or harassed and abused online. He also stressed that many social media platforms are based not on increasing access to accurate reporting, but on increasing engagement, which often means provoking outrage and spreading lies. Also on World Press Freedom Day, our UNESCO colleagues in Myanmar say they remain committed to working with the people to protect and defend their press freedom, as well as to promote the safety and protection of journalists and media workers. Since the military takeover last February, at least 154 journalists have been arrested, while at least 55 journalists remain under detention. 3 journalists have been killed. The number of journalists sentenced to imprisonment in Myanmar is increasing, with 33 journalists having been formally sentenced by local courts. And as you know, at 12:45 today, the U.S. Special Representative and President of the Security Council for the month of May, Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, will be in this room to brief you on the Council's program of work for the month of May. Tomorrow's virtual guest will be the World Food Programme's Chief Economist, Arif Hussain, and the Food and Agriculture Organization's Director of Emergencies, Rain Paulson. They will discuss the launch of the 2022 Global Report on Food Crises. And we thank our friends in Cambodia and Mauritius for their full payments to the regular budget. These 2 deposits take us to 96 fully paid up member states. Sorry, any questions? Yes, Benno.
Thank you. The U.S. Supreme Court is supposed to overturn Roe v. Wade. Does the Secretary General have a comment about that?
Well, I don't want to speculate what will happen at this point, so I don't have any direct comment on the U.S. Regarding the Secretary General's position, as you know, the Secretary General has long believed that sexual and reproductive health and rights are the foundation for lives of choice, empowerment, and equality for the world's women and girls. And without the full participation of 50% of its population, the world would be the biggest loser. And then beyond that, he has repeatedly pointed to what he has said is a global pushback that we're seeing on women's rights, including reproductive rights and essential health services. And he believes it's essential to keep pursuing women's rights. Yes, Celia.
Farhan, while he was in Africa, or he is in Africa, don't you think the Secretary General could have gone to Mali, where the situation is so bad right now? Did he choose on purpose not to go there because of the coup?
There's a limit to the number of countries the Secretary General can visit at any given time. The countries we had planned on for what we had called the Ramadan solidarity visits had been, as you know, the 3 countries that were visited, which are to say Senegal, Niger, and Nigeria. Other countries can be visited at later times. And yes.
Spate of violence in India coinciding with Eid, the latest violence in Jodhpur. Is there any reaction from the Secretary General?
I think the basic point is our hope that the various communities will work together, and that the government and the security forces will ensure that everyone can go about their activities, including their celebratory activities, peacefully. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to Paulina Kubiak.